This week on A Lively Experiment, we are heading into crunch time at the General Assembly. We'll have the big bills that are still in play. And what is the future for Rhode Island's troubled transit agency? We talk with a policy expert who has been following RIPTA for years.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, attorney and legal analyst Lou Pulner. Paige Clausius-Parks, executive director of KIDS COUNT Rhode Island. And former Cranston Mayor Allan Fung. Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Hummel, and it is great to be back with you again this week. With a mid-June adjournment on the horizon, lawmakers still have some major decisions to make before the gavel comes down for the last time this year. As always, the biggest decisions will surround the budget. But payday lending, public records law changes, and gun legislation are all still up in the air. Allan, let me begin with you. The one thing that has been decided, but maybe with a little bit of controversy, is the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. And I know as a mayor, you talked about this an awful lot. So your thoughts about it? It's gotten farther than we've ever had before. What do you think?
You know, it's about time. You know, it's been years now that many mayors, town administrators have been handcuffed and not be able to even talk publicly when a case is being brought forward. You know, the bill that's kind of the compromise that it's come forward that hopefully will have some legs and traction this year, you know, should allow, you know, cities and towns, the chief executives, the police chiefs, the ability to talk about the case, give the chiefs who should have more flexibility in the discipline process, that ability to impose discipline, not just 2 days, but hopefully, you know, a couple weeks discipline without going through this costly, expensive process that we have set by statute right now in Rhode Island. It's time that it has to happen.
I thought that the maximum in the bill that we're talking about was 5 days. It was
5 for minor infractions. Up to 14 for, and that's a matter of interpretation, right?
That's excellent. And the only problem that the media seems to have, and ACLU and Common Cause, is that they don't have to give over the body cam for minor violations, and minor violations is going to be determined by the chief. So it's kind of illusory as to what is a minor infraction.
Yeah,
I think this is a good example of when a bill would have been really useful to have an equity impact statement, because we know the Leobor Act really can greatly impact communities of color, or communities that are highly policed. So to be able to look at the bill and also some of the contention around this bill and look at it from an equity lens, to be able to figure out is this improvement? Is it enough improvement? And how do we see it impacting different communities?
Yeah, I think, particularly for mayors, we used to go to the chiefs and the mayors, and you know you'd want to say something. And it made it look like you were hiding. So being able to at least tell the public, look, this is some of what we're looking at, and this is where we're going, I think that's going to go a long way.
No, it does go a long way for transparency, letting the public know what is happening in the whole process. Because, anytime you have something set by statute, a framework like that, where you're not able to speak about it, everyone's thinking you're hiding something. And as a mayor, the police chief standing by your side, you have at least the ability to give some information to the general public about what is going on and why you're taking these actions or not taking the actions. That's been a big handcuff for decades now with this law in effect. And, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, not only just accountability of the officers, but holding government officials accountable so that the taxpayers, the voters know exactly what is going on, whether someone did something right or wrong. So that's why, it took a while, but I'm glad that the sides, came together to try to work out these compromises. And it's still not perfect, but it's better than what we have currently.
Transparency is so important, and this is going to go a long way. I agree.
Paige, I know you've been looking at payday lending.
Yes.
Tell me about where that stands now.
Well,
it's been a long battle.
It's been too long of a battle. Like, why are we still talking about this?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a business that is preys on poverty. It's benefiting institutions with money at the backs of people in poverty. It's predatory.
It's 260% interest is what it is.
And right. it gets people trapped in the cycle of poverty and owing. And we're really proud that one of our senior policy analysts actually spoke in opposition of this bill this year and used her own personal experience. As a person with a graduate degree and very accomplished, could still get stuck in the payday lending trap. So it impacts a lot of people, maybe more people than are actually out and talking about getting trapped in payday lending.
It's still in play, though. It hasn't got. I know it passed the House last year. It had to get through the Senate. We've still got a ways to go this session.
It's still in play, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
You know what? If it's been 13 years, I don't see much. Again, the person who is lobbying for the payday lenders
is a former Speaker of the House.
Exactly, and you know what? He's put them at bay for 13 years, and I would love to see the bill pass. Make no mistake, it is predatory. It's a continuous debt cycle, and it does prey on the disadvantaged and the poorer communities. But I don't have much hope that it will pass.
It is usurious, and there's no doubt about it. And it is targeted at a certain community. They market within certain communities, and Paige is right. It puts individuals who need immediate cash at an immediate disadvantage, and it traps them into that process.
You never get out of the hole, right? Because some people, they parade people in to testify, this is the quick cash that I needed, and it got me over the hump. But we all know if you needed the cash a month ago, you're probably going to need it months down the line, right?
It doesn't address the root cause of why do people not have enough money to be able to sustain their lives. Even people who are working don't have enough to sustain their lives. That is the problem that we should be tackling, and not allowing these predatory industries to continue to make the problems worse and worse.
Lou, the budget this year is always, that's the big one in play. And I found it interesting. RIPAC put out a study. Michael DeBiase, who has been very active in taking in RIPAC over the years, said that the McKee administration did what everybody said they weren't going to do, was use ARPA money, the Federal Rescue Act money, to pay for operational expenses, which is going to be a problem down the line.
Of course it is. I mean, I don't understand. We just can never get out of our own way when it comes to the budget in Rhode Island. What's going to be $13 million this year?
$14 billion, almost, yeah.
And I still say that's twice what New Hampshire is, and they don't have a sales tax. I say that every time we go in this discussion. But yeah, we got a $196 million surplus this year, which is great, but it's not going to be there next year. And the programs he's funding today are not going to be able to be paid for next year. And it's just a horrible cycle, kind of like payday lending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, as a former mayor, you were always taught one-time fixes into your budget, which are lasting costs, are not a good practice.
Right.
And, whether it's on the local level, state level, federal level, but at the state and local level, we can't print money. It's on the taxpayers. And that's where that growth has to be checked. And I'm glad, RIPAC is constantly looking at that budget to see those impacts.
Yeah, the good news, at least for this year, is the May Revenue Estimating Conference, say that quickly 3 times, has an extra $60 million. But, when you have a $14 billion budget, that used to be a lot of money, not so much anymore, right?
Right. Well, I have lots of ideas of how we can use
how
that
can we
surplus.
use that?
Oh, our kids and our families need it tremendously.
Yeah.
So there are many things that we can do that are one time that can help fill the gaps that we have. So one thing that we've learned through COVID is the impact of our crisis response stabilization programs for our kids with mental health issues are still in a child mental health crisis. And the crisis mobile response units have been administered by Family Service Rhode Island and Tides Family Service. And what they do is they bring people into communities where kids are to do assessments on kids. 92% success rate of getting kids directly into services they need within 30 to 45 days. It's helped to alleviate the wait times in our emergency rooms. We've heard from school districts say it's a game changer, and they're running out of money this year.
Wow.
So let's keep that going for one more year while we keep helping our kids recover from the pandemic. That's just one way that we can use that funding to meet the immediate needs that were exacerbated by COVID that has a direct impact on our kids, families, schools, and our health.
Just finally, before we move on to the next topic, anything else you're looking at in the waning days? We've got about 3 weeks left. Anything you're keeping your eye on?
You know, as you know, walking those halls so many years, anything can happen.
Right.
And it's in the art of the deal as the budget's about to come out. That's where the trade-offs go with some of these bills, and that's why, you know, everyone's just got to be constantly mindful to see what could pop up at the last minute as a trade-off for, you know, this, you know, piece of the budget or that.
When I worked up at the General Assembly, we had a team of 5 people for the Journal back in the day, and I remember watching the sun come up sometimes, and then it would take the reporters like 3 months to figure out the 400 bills that they passed. So anything you're looking at, Lou?
No, I am concerned about the mental health issues, and I think that should be funded or refunded. And the payday lending, I'd like to see that happen, but I just don't have any good feeling about it.
Okay. There's been a lot of discussion about RIPTA, the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, and the future of it. There's been a lot of discussion. They passed a bond 10 years ago to move the hub from Kennedy Plaza. There have been 7 options going on. I sat down this week with John Flaherty. He's an advocate. He works with Grow Smart Rhode Island, and nobody who knows more about RIPTA. He's been looking at it for decades. And I asked him about both moving the hub and their financial problems. Here's a little bit of our interview this week.
It's important to know that, at least from Grow Smart's perspective, we've been longtime champions for building a full-service indoor transit center in Providence. The bond for this passed back in 2014, so it's been 10 years, but we haven't been able to get behind it, and we've in fact said we think it should be paused until there's been a commitment by state leaders to sustainably fund the transit service. Without the service, a hub is of little consequence to people who use transit. For the transit system to really work right, it's got to be convenient, it's got to be reliable, and it's got to be frequent. And if it doesn't have those ingredients, then it's going to be a hard sell to get folks who aren't currently using the system to use it. So where you locate the hub plays an important part in that.
Why has RIPTA been such a troubled agency over the years, and seemingly more just within the last couple of years?
A big chunk of it is funded through the state's gas tax, which has been a declining source of revenue, and there's not been much of a political mandate to fix that. And so they hobble along year after year. The gas tax proceeds go down. Inflation continues to go up over the years, and that puts the squeeze on the service. And if you talk to most riders, myself included, people will say that the agency deploys their very limited resources in probably the best way possible, that move the most number of people, but it still hobbles along.
If you want to see my entire interview with John Flaherty, just go to our YouTube page. It's the Rhode Island PBS YouTube page, and just look for our interview. Paige, we could do an entire show on RIPTA, but there is this interesting thing about the bricks and mortars versus the service, and they've been kind of in this death spiral of, we're having financial troubles, now we need to cut routes, but if you can't rely on RIPTA, who's going to take it? And then you lose ridership.
Right, and we know also for our kids and families to be able to have reliable access with public transportation, especially for our families who rely on transportation to get to work. Extremely important that we have a good public transportation infrastructure for those families, because it connects to so many other issues that impact our economy, our families, and our kids. And there needs to be a long-term solution for this. One of the things that Rhode Island KIDS COUNT has been in strong support of is for the revenue for Rhode Island, which would put a 3% tax onto folks who earn more than $1 million, and it would provide funding to be reserved for certain things. So for childcare, early childhood education, K through 12 education, higher education, and then certain infrastructure projects related to bridges and roads, and that's another way that we can make sure we are able to have a stronger transportation system, but we need the revenue to do it and the long-term strategy.
But that's always been the problem. The revenue goes into the general fund. They eliminated the restricted receipt accounts, Mike O'Keefe, when he was heading up the House Finance. So that sounds like a great idea, but unless you put it aside, who's going to do that?
Nobody.
Well, this bill actually creates a restricted receive for this. Okay. So
it would be one of the first in many tries to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I've always been upset that the gas tax goes into the general fund because it was supposed to be used for roads and bridges. And because it hasn't been, we still have the worst roads and bridges in the country.
And they sold a lot of lotteries over the years that it's going to go to education, right? And where does it go?
Yeah, to the general fund. But the bottom line, getting back to RIPTA, you need a comprehensive solution. The one point I do disagree with John about is we can't wait. You've got to have a comprehensive package of not only sustaining a sustainable funding source for RIPTA, because let's face it, this isn't Boston. We don't have a T system. RIPTA is the only true source of ridership across the state for many individuals who might not have a vehicle. So they're an important component of the discussion in Rhode Island. But second of all, building that hub center isn't just about building a hub center. You're trying to build what they call transit-oriented development, TOD. That type of a development will help, if you do it right, explore and hopefully expand your commercial business base. Other businesses hopefully will be attracted to come in, because with what could happen, you're going to have individuals. Workforce housing hopefully is a component of it too. So people are working downtown. They're taking riding on RIPTA to go to different parts of the state.
Well, they set that up at the new Central Falls Pawtucket line train station that they put a lot more lines, and then there's housing right there.
Correct.
I think the problem over the years, though, Lou, traditionally is RIPTA hasn't really had a godfather, for lack of a better term, up in the General Assembly, and you need juice with the people who are making the decisions. I don't like this term, but some people have called it the red-headed stepchild.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my
Well,
mouth.
I can use that term. I don't prefer others to use it, but when my hair was a little redder. But don't you think you need juice up at the State House?
Of course you do, but everyone's got special interests, and RIPTA isn't one of them.
Yeah. Well, we will see where it goes. Okay, it would not be a show without we were talking about the Washington Bridge. And the last time we were with you, they had just come out with not revenue estimates, but cost estimates that the cost to replace is going to be well north now of $600 million. This has had an effect on so many people. I know you live on the other side of the bridge, but you go to the East Bay a lot.
Every day I drive across that bridge to bring my son to school. And it has a big impact on how long our commute is, not knowing how long the commute will be on a daily basis. Also for our employees. We have staff that come in across the bridge every day as well.
And they've had to adjust their times, I'm sure.
Yeah, luckily we have flexible schedules at our work.
So you're not sitting there going up, you're 10 minutes late.
Yeah, or the bridge is really bad. You want to work from home today? Okay, that's what you have to do. So we've been able to adjust, but not everybody can do that.
I think the last time we had you on was really early in the process. So now we've had a lot. We heard about Governor McKee has stepped back from the day of reckoning. It seems like the accountability and the legal are kind of, it's almost like we really can't talk to you about that until we get through the legal process, but that's going to be a very long time.
That's going to be a long process. There's, Max Wistow and John Savage are starting that process right now, where it's just, getting the initial discovery, trying to get some of these individuals to be accountable, hold them accountable for, what has transpired to get us to this point. But meanwhile, it's going to be a long runway that we're going to have to sit and wait to try to get more appropriate answers, that not just travel times, but how much is it really going to cost? When are some of these factors going to really kick in? Because we talked about the direct traffic that's going on. What we're also seeing is a lot of individuals on the side streets trying to get onto the roads, get to work, they're impacted every single day that are, close to 195.
I think it's going to be more than 600 million. I really do. And we don't have the federal government and Biden stepping in and saying, "Oh, we'll take care of that," like they are doing with the Baltimore port. Yeah. It's not going to be.
What's
good.
the over/under on years, Lou? How many years?
I'll bet you 3.5 anyway.
Yeah. You think it's going to be beyond?
I think
the 26
beyond,
election?
because just from a construction standpoint, I've double that.
You know
5
what?
to 6.
Being Rhode Island, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just not.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is people kind of want to know. It's the question. Whenever something goes wrong, you kind of want to get to the bottom of it. And you can hear all this. The lawyers are going to go after this, but people want to know. I don't think anybody's out for blood or somebody's job, but where did the breakdown come? How did we go from this bridge was okay, seemingly in July, to it shutting down in December?
Right. People want to know that so we don't make the same mistake again. So if we're rebuilding this bridge, we want to know what happened so we don't have this problem again. So it's important to really understand what happened, what went wrong, not repeat it again, create different structures or systems of accountability so that we prevent this from happening in the future.
I also wonder where the federal government comes in here. They've been the savior on a lot of the big cases. So we're thinking the lawyers are going here, the administration's been kind of like this, but the DOJ in Providence, they're not going to announce it until they kind of skulk along and they take their time until they have a case. I wonder whether they're ultimately going to be the ones who find who's responsible.
Well, at the very least, the Inspector General really, needs to have a lot of oversight and, diving in parallel with what the lawyers are doing, because the lawyers are trying to hold them accountable financially, but we're going to need a lot of assistance from the federal government, on top of the finances, but getting down to the root cause of it, because a lot of those dollars belong to them too.
Yeah. Wouldn't you think the Federal Highway Administration want to know where all that money went? Literally into the river?
You would think. It's a disaster. I mean, it's just a disaster. Yeah. It's not getting better anytime soon.
All right, I got a couple other things I want to get to, but let's go to outrages and or kudos so we have a little bit of time to let it breathe. Mayor, what do you have this week?
No, my outrage is actually in the sports field. I just read that, and I can't believe the NCAA's allowed it to get to this point with this name, image, likeness, NIL deal, where the University of Florida made a promise to one of their recruits, a star quarterback, for a $9 million NIL deal, and broke its promise to him, where now this quarterback is in federal court suing for fraud and misrepresentation. How do we get to this point?
Yeah, I saw the Wall Street Journal had that article, and he's, so then, and the kids made the commitment, so you think it's going to come, but it's just awful now because it's really they're buying athletes. Because now it's the transfer portal makes it easy for them to get there, and then they promise these gobs of money.
You promise, but keep your commitment.
Yeah.
That's fraud if you're not doing that.
Yeah. Lou, what do you got?
Forever, marijuana was illegal, gambling was illegal, and when it turns to big revenue for the state of Rhode Island, it's no longer illegal. We've got smoking. They still exempt the Bally's casinos. I just think we whore ourselves out to the casinos. And now, not only is the smoking bill not going to pass, Bally's wants to increase the credit limit to $100,000 from $50,000. So you want to talk about cycle of debt and getting to the people who are more in danger of bad things. I'm just saying all the sin taxes are good now.
Before we get to yours, Paige, and first of all, welcome. Nice to have you. This is your debut. Should we keep her on? What do you think?
Absolutely.
We'll invite her back.
Thanks,
I will
guys.
get to your outrage or kudo in a second, but I did want to talk about this casino smoking. In what world? So everywhere else in Rhode Island, you can't smoke, but the legislature has carved out this exemption. And what blows me away, so look, it's 2 and 2. We talked about the former speaker, the Senate president, the Senate president has cancer. And he doesn't make the connection between smoking, and people say you can go somewhere else, but it's the workers who are basically stuck there. So, I mean, what is not adding up here?
It's the revenue. I mean, it's been argued by the casinos that if you stop letting people smoke in the casinos, the revenue is going to go down, not only for them.
20 years ago, Dunkin' Donuts, you used to go in, you couldn't see the guy serving you coffee, and then they said, we're going to lose all this business. You know what happened? It opened up a whole tranche of new people, right, who came in after the smoke cleared.
Yep.
Is it as simple as just legislature standing in the way?
Well,
maybe just the Senate president standing in the way.
Right.
Look, times change. And you have data supporting a lot of what we're talking about, too. So, and that's their job up at the General Assembly to really, plow through a lot of these tough issues.
Yeah.
I was in the House Finance Committee meeting when employees from Bally's came in to testify, and It was so impactful. One employee came in with all of her medication lined up on the table, that she had no health issues until working there. And just the impact on the employees' lives of being forced to work in conditions where they are around smoking was just so impactful. I didn't know much about the issue before that hearing, and I walked away feeling like, why? Like, why is this allowed to happen?
When, my kids look at me like I'm a fossil, that you used to be able to smoke on planes, Lou. You remember that? So my daughter said, now wait a minute. So row 15 was smoking and row 14 was non-smoking. Did they have plexiglass up? No. So you think of the flight attendants who have had secondhand smoke issues. What was the vibe at that? The legislators seemed pretty sympathetic to their plight?
Absolutely, they seemed sympathetic. They questioned Bally's pretty intensely around, do you really allow employees to have choice of where they're working? But the employees were very, very strong in their testimony, and I think there was a lot of outrage for them and sympathy for them as well.
Great. Do you have an outrage or a kudo this week?
I have a kudo this week. I'm going to share some good news.
Great.
So I want to give a kudos to Central Falls, City of Central Falls, a beautiful city. Oftentimes we report data on how Central Falls is struggling, but over the last year, even more so, we're hearing so many great things coming out of Central Falls. Building of a new high school. Last month was the announcement of Dr. Milken and Mayor Rivera opening a new housing facility that's connected to health for women and children. I just heard yesterday that also the school district is in the city is outpacing their child outreach screenings this year, which is the screenings to identify kids that may have developmental disabilities and allows them to connect to preschool special education. I mean, Central Falls is doing a lot of amazing work. We haven't seen the results yet and the data, but it takes time. But the leadership in Central Falls, I'm just so impressed.
The little engine that could, right?
That's right.
There we go. Lou, one last thing I want to talk about, Access to Public Records Act is, there's a lot of changes coming up. Alan and Lou, you can chime in. And I think one of the problems that I think that the advocates, they put like 37, 47 changes. We talked to Lou Pulner for this show. And if you could pick out one or two that was really important, but you look at the General Assembly and the governor's people came out so strongly against it. It was almost like an orchestrated effort. And I wonder whether this is the year or maybe not, or maybe it gets lost. What do you think?
Transparency. That APRA really needs to, be looked at constantly so that, the general public has an opportunity to know what is going on in government. But a lot of people also forget, though, even if there's an exemption there, if it's a public interest, a significant public interest there, that can overweigh some of that, and it's still up to the municipality or the state.
You don't have to do it.
Correct.
It gives you the option of doing it.
But even still, you've got a lot of roadblocks that get put up, and I do a lot of APRA stuff for a lot of my clients, but the bottom line is, it's got to be the right balance, and that law really needs to be constantly looked at and vetted.
Final thoughts on that, Lou?
Yeah, no, just remember what it took to get those emails from the administration officials that traveled to Pennsylvania. It was a nightmare trying to get those, and we finally did, and now we know why they were trying to hide them, which doesn't surprise me why McKee doesn't want to have full
and the
support
Washington
in.
Bridge.
Yeah.
Right? You think of all those emails because that tells the story. Okay, folks, it is a quick half hour. We appreciate your time. Lou and Alan and Paige, welcome. Good to have you here. We hope to have you back. Folks, if you don't catch us Friday at 7 or Sunday at noon, we archive all of our shows at ripbs.org/lively. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and wherever you get your favorite podcast. Take us along in the car or maybe on a walk. We are heading into crunch time for the General Assembly. Stick with us next week. We'll have a full recap and analysis as the lively experiment continues. We hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by.
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.